Hello guys, you're welcome to my channel. My name is Amaka. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and subscribe, and also turn on the notification bell so that whenever I upload new videos you will be notified. In this tutorial we are going to be learning how to make a madam blouse. Some people call it madam blouse, some call it IGBO blouse. Whatever you call it, that is what we are going to be making today. So we are making a madam blouse, and it's going to be an off-shoulder blouse. This is my lining. With this I'm going to cut the satin and the lace. So now this is my starting point. The depth of my off-shoulder is going to be 5 inches. So I'm going to be taking my measurement from this 5 inches. I'm going to place the 5 inches here just like this. Now but because after drafting I'm going to need ½ inch to turn it. I'm going to need ½ inch seam allowance to turn it. So instead of using 5 inches, I'm going to use 4.5 inches. So this is how I'm placing my tape from here. So I'm taking my measurement from 4.5 inches. Now when I fold it, when I fold it, it's still going to bring me back to this 5 inches. I'm going to start by taking my vertical measurement. My bust point is 10.5 inches. 10.5 inches. The under bust point is 14 inches. Now take note, my fabric is on fold. I folded my fabric into 2. So this is my bust point, which is 10.5. The under bust is 14 inches. Then the waist point is 17 inches, while the hip point is 25 inches. The hip point is 25 inches. Then the blouse length is 26 inches. 26 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to extend these points with an horizontal line. So now this is it. This is my starting point. This is my bust point. This is my under bust point. This is my waist point. This is my hip point. This is the full length of the blouse, and this is the hemming allowance. So the neck width I'm working with is 6.5 inches. 6.5 inches plus ½ inch seam allowance. That gives you 7 inches. So this is my neck width. Now this varies. How I got this by removing 1.5 inches from my divided shoulder measurement. Now whatever your divided shoulder measurement is, you can decide to minus either 1.5 inches or 1 or 2 inches from your divided shoulder measurement, and whatever it gives you, that is what you will use as your neck width. So it's different, it's optional. Now I'm going to input my armhole measurement. The armhole measurement I'm working with is 19 inches. 19 divided by 2 gives you 9.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 9.5 inches here. Take note of how I placed my tape. From this 4.5 inches, I'm going to mark 9.5 inches. So this is my 9.5 inches. So this is my chest point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take my bust measurement. The bust circumference I'm working with is 44 inches. 44 divided by 4 gives you 11 inches. So I'm going to mark 11 inches here. Okay, so this is 11 inches. I'm going to connect this point to this point with my armhole curve. Just like this. So for me to impute impute my dart, I need my bust span measurement. Now the bust span measurement I'm working with is 8 inches. 8 divided by 2 gives you 4 inches, plus half inch seam allowance gives you 4.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 4.5 inches here, I'll mark it on my under bust, waist point, hip point, and on the hem, and I'll connect it. I'll connect these points together. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to impute my dart on the, now this is my under bust point. On the under bust point, I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. I'm going to mark 1 inch here, and I'll mark 1 inch here, making it 2 inches. Now on the waist point, this is my waistline, I'm going to mark half inch on both sides. Making it 1 inch. Now on the bust point, I'm going to come down by half inch from the bust point. I'll come down by half inch. So with my French curve, I'm going to connect this point to this point. I'll connect it just like this. And I'll connect this point to this point, just like this. I'll connect this point to this point and this point to this point. On the hip point, I'm going to come up by 2 inches. This is my hip line. I'm going to come up by 2 inches. And I'll connect this point to this point and this point to this point. So from this point, now on this point, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. From here, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. From here, I'm going to mark half inch here and half inch here. I'll mark half inch on both sides of this mark. So from this point, I'm going to mark half inch. I'll go up by half inch. And I'll connect this point to this point and this point to this point. after that, the next thing I'm going to do is this point, this line, I'm going to extend this line by 1 inch. Now because I'm going to cut off this point, I'm going to extend this one by 1 inch so that I'll be able to construct another armhole. So that I'll be able to construct a new armhole. So from here I'm going to mark 1 inch. Because of this 1 inch that I'm going to cut off from here, so I'm returning it here so that I'll be able to create a new armhole. To create a new armhole, I'm going to connect this point to this point with my armhole curve, so that I'll be able to create a new armhole. Now I'm going to take my horizontal measurements. My bust circumference is 44 inches. 44 divided by 4 gives you 11 inches, which is this. Plus this 1 inch I'm going to cut off from here gives you 12 inches, plus 3 inches seam allowance gives you 15 inches. Now I'm using 3 inches seam allowance because gives you 15 inches. Now it's better to have excess than to run short of fabric. After sewing, if I have excess fabric, I can cut it off. So it's better to have excess than to run short of fabric. So on the waist point, I'm going to take my waist measurement on the waist point. Now the waist circumference I'm working with is 41 inches. Now 41 inches divided by 4 gives you 10 1/4, plus these 2 inches that I'm going to cut off from here, I'm going to return it here. That gives you 12 1/4, plus 3 inches seam allowance gives you 15 1/4. So I'm going to mark 15 1/4 here. On the hip point, I'm going to take my hip measurement on the hip point. The hip circumference I'm working with is 46 inches. 46 divided by 4 gives you 11.5 inches, plus 3 inches seam allowance, plus 3 inches seam allowance gives you 14.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 14.5 inches here. The same measurement I have here, I'm going to bring it down here. Now I'm going to connect these points together. And I'll connect here with my hip curve. So from this point, I'm going to come up by 2 inches because I want to curve my blouse. So I'm going to come up by 2 inches. And I'll curve it to this point. Now another thing I'm going to do is on this neck, my blouse is going to have a sweet neck. It's going to have a sweetheart neckline. So on this point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. And I'll connect this point to this point with my French curve. So this is from here I came down by 1 inch. I'm going to connect this point to this point with my French curve. Now if you can decide if you want yours to have round neck, you can connect you can curve it, you can come down by 1 inch and curve it to this point and curve it this way, but I don't, this is not what I want. Mine is going to be a sweetheart neckline, so I'm going to curve it this way. So this is it. This is optional. You can decide to use 1.5 inches, or you can even decide to use 2 inches. It all depends on how low you want your sweetheart neckline to go, or how high you want it to be. This is moderate. This is how the client wants it. She doesn't want it to go too low, so this is just okay. So after that, I'm going to blend here very well so that I don't have sharp edges. Or any pointed, don't want, you know, our bust is not pointy, our bust is round. So I'm going to cut it. I'm going to use this to cut out the lace fabric and the satin. So this is it. So this is my back panel. Now I've drawn some lines already. Now this is my zipper allowance. My zipper allowance is 1.5 inches. Now every measurement I'm taking, I'm going to take it away from this line. Now this is how I'll be taking my measurement. I'll be taking my measurement this way, away from my zipper allowance. Now this is my starting point, this is my starting point, and this is my chest point, this is my waist point, this is my hip point, this is the full length of the blouse, and this is the hemming allowance. Now this is how I took my measurements. Remember that when I was taking the front panel, I started my measurement from 4.5 inches. Now this is how I took my measurement, 4.5 inches. So my chest point is 9.5 inches. My waist point is 17 inches. My hip point is 25 inches. The full length of the blouse is 26 inches plus 1 inch hemming allowance. Now I'm going to take my neck width. I'm going to mark my neck width. The neck width I'm working with is the same thing I used at the front. That's what I'm going to use for the back panel as well. So it's 6.5 inches plus ½ inch seam allowance, which gives you 7 inches. So I'm going to mark it 7 inches. I'm going to impute my bust span measurement. The bust span measurement I'm working with is 8 inches. 8 divided by 2 gives you 4 inches. I'm not going to add ½ inch. The front panel was 4.5 inches because I'm going to cut it. So ½ inch was for seam allowance. But this back panel, I'm not going to cut it because I'm not going to cut it. So I'm not going to add that ½ inch. So I'm going to mark 4 inches. So I marked it on the chest point, the waistline, and the hem of the blouse. So I'm going to connect it. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my bust measurement on my chest point. Now the bust circumference I'm working with is 44 inches. 44 divided by 4 gives you 11 inches. So I'm going to mark 11 inches here. So I'll connect this point to this point. So this is my armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to impute my dart. From my chest point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. Then from the hip point, I'm going to go up by 2 inches. I'm going to come up by 2 inches from the hip point, and I'll mark. Now on the waist point, I'm going to mark ½ inch on both sides of this line. So this is my dart. Now I'm going to connect this point to this point to this point to this point. So this is my dart. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to take my horizontal measurement. So the bust measurement I'm working with is 44 inches. 44 divided by 4 gives you 11 inches. So this is 11 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. Gives you 13 inches. On the waist point, I'm going to take my waist measurement on the waist point. Now the waist circumference I'm working with is 41 inches. 41 divided by 4 gives you 10 1/4. So 10 1/4 plus 2 inches seam allowance gives you 12 1/4. So I'm going to mark it. Plus this dart. Now that gives you 12 1/4 plus this 1 inch I'm going to remove for that. This 1 inch I'm removing for that. I'm going to return it here. So that gives you 13 1/4. On the hip point, I'm going to take my hip measurement on the hip point. The hip circumference I'm working with is 46 inches. 46 divided by 4 gives you 11.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 11.5 inches here. 11.5 inches plus 11.5 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance gives you 13.5 inches. So I'm going to mark the same thing here, 13.5 inches. And I'll connect it. Connect this point with my hip curve. So the next thing I'm going to do is to eliminate the zipper bulge. On this waist point, I'm going to come in by 3/4 of an inch. Now this is optional. You can use ½ inch, you can use 3/4 of an inch, you can use 1 inch. So, but I'm using 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch here. and I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to this point. Now make sure you do it smoothly. When doing this, make sure you do it smoothly. So I've connected this point to this point, and I'm going to connect this point to this point. So this is it. Now another thing I'm going to do is here. I'm going to curve this neck, the neckline. So I'm going to come down by I'm going to come down by 1.5 inches, and I'll connect this point to this point. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new zipper allowance. Here I'm going to come in by 3/4 inch. I'll mark it and I'll connect it to this point and this to this point. And I'll connect this to this point. So I have a new zipper allowance. Now this is my new zipper allowance. This one is no longer useful to me. I'm going to cut it off. So I'm going to cut this off, and I have a new zipper allowance. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to curve the side of my blouse. So from this point, I'm going to come up by 2 inches. And I'll connect this point to this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut my blouse. With this, I'm going to cut the satin and the lace fabric. Just the same way, I'm going to use this to cut the satin and the lace fabric. So I'll do it and show you. So this is it. Now I've cut the satin and the lace fabric. Now this is the lace fabric. This is the lace fabric. This is the satin, and this is my lining. The same thing with this one. So this is the back panel. Now this is the lace, this is the satin, and this is the lining. This is the lace, this is the satin, and this is the lining.